Hey, this is Jamie from Broderick and Liturgy, and I'll see you at the Tampa Morgue.
What's up? This is Tony, and you're listening to the Tampa Morgue, episode number 39. And as always, I am joined by my fellow mortician, Mr. Ed Webb. What's up, dude?
Mr. Anderson, what's going on, brother?
Not much, man. We got a busy weekend. We've been doing some interviews this week. You know, we had just had Blood Serpent on Sunday from Vietnam, which was, definitely an awesome interview. Anybody who has not checked out Blood Serpent, great band from Hanoi, Vietnam, and they just put out their album in December. So they what is it? Just a Beast Style. What is it? Beast Style Extermination is the name of the record.
Yes.
It's killer. Definitely recommend checking it out. And the track you just heard was obviously a band from Knoxville, Tennessee. We are joined actually from their vocalist tonight, but we actually played it's Diabolical Edict off the Harbinger of Woke's record. And we are joined tonight by Jamie Bailey, the vocalist and bass player of Brodequin. Dude, we really appreciate you coming on tonight. How you doing?
Good. Hey, thank you guys very much. I appreciate you taking the time and spending some time of your day, busy day, chatting with me about Broderick, and that's awesome. I appreciate it.
No, we feel the same.
It's our pleasure, man. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, are you doing a lot of press right now for the record? Or are you kind of getting a little chill time?
Yeah, there's been a lot more than I think any of us even would have anticipated. You know, even given the time that we were away, I think this kind of took us by surprise. You know how much attention that was coming our way. We were definitely not prepared for that.
You guys, I mean, I know myself. We've been seeing a lot of links with you guys, and just hearing a lot about the new record, and people are talking, man, and it's definitely a killer record. We'll get to the record, but first, I want to start out with talking about your background and the band's background and stuff. So you were born in Monroe, Michigan.
That's correct. Yeah, I was born in Monroe, Michigan. Spent a number of years there. Then we bounced from Michigan to Florida and back to Michigan and New Mexico and California. We lived all over.
What part of Florida were you in, if you don't mind me asking?
So we were in the Port Charlotte area.
Okay.
When we were in Florida. Yeah, we were there. And then we were in San Luis Obispo, California. Just all over the place.
And you were saying Jersey too, before we were talking before the show, you spent some time.
Yeah, just outside of the Philly area, Phoenixville to be specific is where we were at. King of Prussia, kind of that area, Valley Forge.
And actually Mike was born, your brother was born in Toledo, Ohio?
Correct. Yeah, he was born in Toledo, Ohio, which is not that far of a drive from Monroe. Monroe is a much smaller town, and I suppose when time for him to be born, Mom and Dad said, "Hey, Toledo's got a better hospital. We're going there." So that's kind of how that happened.
And you guys, well, now for you and Mike both, you guys grew up, and I'll let you explain. You guys grew up around a very musical family. I mean, there was several members of your family that were involved.
Yeah, my grandfather on my mom's side was a huge musician. He played multiple instruments, mainly bluegrass type music was what he was involved in. So, you had mandolins, banjos, guitars, of course, basses laying around, just all kinds of stuff. And he had a little music room at the back of his house that when we were kids, we would always go back there and plunk around. We had no idea what we were doing. It's just we were picking up different instruments and just seeing what they sounded like. Of course, we're misfretting everything and, do we use a pick for this instrument? Do we not use a pick? We don't know. We're just doing whatever. He always encouraged us to mess around with that stuff, and he'd show us a thing or two on it, but he also would just leave the room and just let us do whatever we wanted. So we could be in there for, maybe we're in there for 10 minutes, and we get kind of bored and we're out. Other days we're in there for an hour and a half, just playing around, trying to understand what these instruments are supposed to do and how they're supposed to sound. And as time went on, he bought my first bass guitar, which was a horrible bass guitar.
Pawn shop, right? Did the old pawn shop?
Pawn shop type thing. Yeah, the action was, 2 inches off the fretboard. Impossible for a kid to make any sense out of this thing. And so I kind of slid over into the guitar world for a little while because it was just so much easier to play, And as time went on, I ended up going back to bass, of course. But yeah, he was always big into it. My dad played guitar. They would swap instruments often, they'd borrow each other's equipment. So we always had musical gear around us. And our parents were super supportive. We had all of our rehearsal spaces were at our house, so like at one time we just basically took over our living room and we had a drum set in the middle of the living room. And they were extremely supportive.
It sounds totally the opposite than most people had back then. You couldn't.
Yeah, no, we had really the best possible scenario when you look at it for trying to, be in a band and write music and things like that, because there can be, as we're all musicians and we all know so many musicians, so many parents can be, you're wasting your time. What are you doing? Just go to school, get a job, blah, 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 whatever the case may be. There can be a lot of resistance. And we were fortunate enough not to experience that and never took that for granted. Maybe we did at first because it was normal to us. It was just like, well, this is what we do. But then as time went on and we're meeting other people, we realized, wow, we really have a kind of a special situation here where Mom and Dad let us take over, square footage of the house to just make noise. You know what I mean? So it was pretty awesome.
And your grandfather, so Mike got into the guitar. So that's basically why your grandfather wanted you to play the bass, because basically,
yes.
You had a bassist.
He was trying to go ahead and lay that foundation of, oh, okay, well, if Mike's going to play guitar, well, you need a bassist. So you should play bass. And it just kind of started going that way. It was interesting.
Do you remember like the first music you actually remember? What I mean by that is, like when you were a kid, the first songs that kind of started sticking with you, like, I'm talking young age. So it's anything.
Yeah. Yeah. So if I was remembering the very first song that I had, that I was cognizant of, it would have been Dead Babies by Alice Cooper. And because I was I was kind of like captured by the lyrics. Like, well, what's he talking about? You know, I didn't really understand. I just knew he was saying dead babies. And as a kid,
out.
that, you know, I was like, what the hell is happening here? You know what I mean?
Exactly.
You know, like should I enjoy this? Should I be scared of this? You know what I mean? So that's probably the first song that I actually really remember. Mom and Dad were into things like, I mean, it you know, it varied, but a lot of the stuff they were into was Alice Cooper, Black Sabbath, things like that. So that's where I kind of had that exposure to some darker things per se, especially as a kid.
Yeah, I'm a big Cooper fan, and I even remember when he was on the Muppet Show, and I was kind of like, you would see him as on the Muppet Show as a kid, and it was kind of like, wow, this guy looks this way, but he's on there with it. Was, you know, he did. I think he did Welcome to My Nightmare on the Muppet Show.
Did he?
Yeah,
really?
Yeah, he did. But
that's nice.
Yeah, so you did that. So you know, and then what? You started getting into like. What was it your first? I know you got into Iron Maiden, Metallica, and Slayer. Was that pretty much the first bands that you started to absorb, or did you go like any of the AC/DCs or Kisses, or kind of went right to the?
Yeah, see, for somehow, some way, I kind of jumped over that, like AC/DC and Kiss and things of that nature. Even Judas Priest escaped me for a while. I just kind of ended up in this Metallica, Megadeth, Slayer world. You know, and then what I needed to do, it seemed, was I went back and started seeing what I kind of missed to fill in those gaps. And like the first extreme metal stuff that I can remember getting into would have been the first record I think I got was Ultras of Madness by Morbid Angel, was the first exposure to that world. And then dug in, and, you know, back in the day when you had the printed zines and you could order them and, you know, this and that, and start ordering demo tapes out of those and, you know, just trying to find more and more of it. And then I guess it was all downhill from there, so to speak.
Yeah, we were talking a couple of weeks ago about how you used to go to, which I know you guys used to do too in Brodequin. You would go to the record stores, and you can actually like put your cassette tapes, your demo tapes for sale on their counters, and a lot of them would let you do it. You know.
Yeah, they were open to that. It was a non-issue. You could just say, "Hey, can we put these out here and just, you know, just guys give them away for free, or let people take them?" And they'd be like, "Yeah, sure, fine."
Yeah,
it was super cool. And now you're challenged really to even find a record store.
Yeah. That's definite. And so, you know, and with Mike, you know, with the playing the instruments, Mike excelled right away. He started playing around 11 and 12, but he was a pretty quick learner.
Yeah, somewhere in that ballpark. And he just was able to move naturally with it. It kind of started clicking from him at an early age. Obviously you have the challenges when you're a kid, and it may have been even around 10 or so, you know, where you can't make the big spreads with your fingers and things like that, right? We were learning an instrument, and, you know, the sizing is much more for an adult than a kid. But other than those earlier, just, you know, physical challenges as you're growing, yeah, he caught on rather quickly. He was way ahead of me in every aspect. Even when I was playing guitar, I never could catch up. And still, it's the same way today. You know, if I'm writing riffs, I'll come to him with something, and it's going to be pretty rough around the edges. You know, it's going to be pretty dirty, and he'll take it and make it into something that we can actually use. And he'll take it kind of where I wanted to go, and always beyond where I originally had thought I would go with it.
Then you guys moved when you guys moved to Knoxville, you guys moved to Tennessee, and there was at that time period, there was no death metal scene there, right? I know you guys had Besieged and
yeah, we had Besieged and Inner Self, I think, were probably the bands in Knoxville at the time. I think that was it. You know, there was a lot of other kind of metal, new metal, you know, Pantera clones and things like that, but no death metal to really be seen on the local front. Other than those guys. Yeah.
And your guys' first band, your first band that actually, I guess, had an actual name to it and stuff, was a band called, that you and Mike put together. It was a thrash metal band. It was called Hollow.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we had a couple guys that were friends of ours from, I think Mike actually went to school with them, and then I met the one guy at work. You know, we worked at a grocery store, and we kind of, you know, thought, well, this is who's here. This is who we've got at our disposal, so to speak. You know what I mean? We can make something happen here. So we started trying to do something. And then what ended up happening is that band played a show with Inner Self. I got in touch with Tim from Inner Self. You know, I know it's going to sound crazy to some people, but, you know, we actually used to write letters, you know, when you didn't have an email address.
Remember those days.
So I came across his address somewhere. I don't know if it was a demo tape or a CD or whatever, but I had written to Tim, and we talked a few times, and we set up a show together, and that's where we met Chad, you know, and we started bumming around with
at a Hollow show, right? So Hollow was playing with Enter Self, was it?
Correct. That's exactly right. Yeah. And we met Chad. and we hit it off with Chad, went to numerous shows together, hung around together all the time. And one thing led to another. And that was the birth of Brodequin was when we decided, hey, we should do something.
And you guys, so what? So Hollow was done. You guys put an end to that.
Yeah.
And you guys wanted to play basically more brutal music. You wanted to play like a heavier, more extreme.
Right. That was the goal. You know, we wanted to have a death metal band, but we didn't know any death metal musicians. And, you know, you didn't have the ability to jump on Facebook, see who's in your area that can do that type of thing. You're extremely limited by who you know and who they know. So we did what we could. Then when we met Chad, we said, oh, okay, you know, he's into the same stuff we are. Everybody's getting along really well. We can make this work. And that's how that happened. You know, it was like, here we go. We can take this opportunity and do what we always wanted to do. And, you know, we had 3 pieces in place, but at that time we weren't what we thought was complete. You know, we'd gotten together a few times and we didn't really have any songs at that point. Just, you know, a bucket full of riffs we'd jam, or maybe we'd play some other song by Cannibal Corpse or something, you know, just goofing off. But we were going down that path of, well, what are we going to do for vocals? We got to find a vocalist here. You know, what are we going to do? So that led to another challenge because, you know, again, you have a very limited supply of people into this in the area. So we thought we kind of hit a wall there. We weren't exactly sure what we were going to do. It was probably, you know, 3-4 months of banging our head against the wall. Who do you know? Who could we ask? Who can we figure out can do this, can fill this role for us? And I started experimenting on the way home from work. I'd drive home from work and just try to make these ridiculous noises. You know, it's like how are these guys
People
doing
are staring
this?
at you next to on the road while they're driving by. Like,
right.
Fuck?
Exactly. How do they do this? This is crazy. It doesn't make any sense. This actually hurts. You know, this is stupid. Why am I doing this? And then one day, I think I probably got home 10 minutes early or something. So nobody was at the rehearsal space yet. And I was just goofing off, and it kind of happened, so to speak. Like it clicked and worked. And I thought, oh, that sounded okay. That wasn't so bad. So, you know, going back to the old 4-track recorder we had in the jam space, I hit record and recorded a few and played it for them. And they were like, oh yeah, I think there's something there. And I still was not convinced. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know about this. But over the course of a couple weeks, practicing on my way home from work, it became, you know, much more comfortable. And that's how I ended up doing vocals. I never had any intention to do vocals. That was never on the radar for me. I was either going to be playing guitar or playing bass, and that's how it was going to go. So the vocal thing just was a kind of a happy accident, if you will.
It's funny you say that. We have a lot of guys, Ed, we were saying last week, a lot of guys come on who are vocalists, and they just, same story as you, they were like, listen, eventually I just got tired of looking for a singer, and I decided to do it.
Right. I mean, I never thought of that being my role, you know, just did not see it happening. Now, of course, that's great. You know, I have no issue with it. I love it. But early on, it was very much, really, I wasn't even comfortable with it, honestly, until probably the second record. You know, it was probably Festival of Death is when I became like, okay, you know, this is what we're going to do now, you know, but even on the first record, yeah, I wasn't comfortable even playing those shows early on. It wasn't there for me. It still didn't feel natural at all. Now it does, of course, but it's been, you know, many, many years. But in the beginning, it was absolutely a struggle.
Well, playing and singing isn't exactly easy, especially when you're playing
especially that stuff,
technical, technical
right.
death metal
right.
or any kind of things where even the bass isn't just doing, and no disrespect, Tom, but a Tom Araya open note, sure. Where he fills the gaps with just being heavy.
Right.
Great. He's a great front man, and he can play bass, but for the most part, he knows his role. But in death metal,
right.
we don't know our role. We just fucking we play.
Exactly. So that, and that's a challenge too. It's still a challenge, like, okay, yeah, the old stuff is fine. You've got that on autopilot. But when you're writing new material, it is very much a cerebral event. You have to sit here and think about, okay, well, this is what I'm going to be playing. Okay, here's where the vocals are going. Now I got to think how I'm going to breathe my way through this. You know what I mean? Because when you're playing, we all know how exerting that is. And so you're trying to get that all tuned up and tied together. And yeah, it's one of those things you have to constantly think about, without a doubt.
Well, especially a live show when you're just practicing in a room There's no
Yeah.
exertion. You're just going through motions, so to speak. When you play live and you start head whipping and
Right.
oh
Right.
my goodness gracious.
And you've got that whole adrenaline dump going, you know what I mean? And it's a lot to deal with. Your heart rate goes through the roof and your breathing goes through the roof.
Yep.
And yeah, there's a lot to kind of juggle there. You're right, man.
2 songs in, you're ready for the car.
Yeah.
You're like,
absolutely right. Yeah.
So that's around 98, right? You guys took you what 3 or 4 months to decide on a name actually, because you guys were there was Tortured Existence you guys were tossing around.
There were names being tossed around. That was definitely one of the names that was tossed around. I can't remember any. I had a list, of course, back then, like we all do when we're getting started. And Mike and Chad were very much kind of like, whatever you want to do, man. They were not, hardcore on any name. And then I said, okay, well, I really like this one. I know I'm pronouncing it wrong, right? But I know I like the look of this. I kind of like the feel of this and what I think we could do with this. And they were like, yeah, cool, done.
That was easy.
and that was really kind of how it went down. It was very fast. When I finally presented that one, it was like, yeah, fine, let's go with that.
And for the listeners who don't know, I know this is something you have to recite every interview probably, but you can give as short as you want, but an explanation what a Brodequin, actually is.
Sure. So for some visuals, if people have it, and you can find it online too, of course. We did use it on a couple versions of the Instruments of Torture CD and the Trey card. We put it there. It was on the back of some of the Instruments of Torture shirts. What it was basically is, if you can imagine kind of a longer, a box that kind of takes on, you slip your legs into the box basically. Okay. And you have outer boards that go outside of your legs. Then you also have 2 inner boards in between your legs, and boards that are also butted up against those inside. And what they do or did is they'll take wooden or iron wedges and place them in between the board and your leg and then drive them down. And so what that does is the boards are there to reinforce. They're not going to go anywhere. And what ends up happening is, as that wedge is going down, it'll shatter the bones of the legs or the knees or wherever they put it. That's where you're going to have a fracture. The individual that is in the imagery was a priest back in the day from France, and records have it when he suffered the Brodequin that the marrow from his bones actually flowed out of the wounds. It's an absolutely devastating piece of equipment, if you want to call it that, or I mean, really, it is just a box, right? I mean, when you look at it, it's nothing that's any kind of advanced technology. It's very simple in its construction, and absolutely massive in the damage it can dish out.
Yeah, and obviously people who do know the band, you guys are very history orientated when it comes to these kind of things. Now that started, that was something that was brought to you. Now your father and your grandmother, right? They were very into the family tree. And I think in your family, you had Civil War members and Revolutionary War.
Yeah.
That played a big part in that decision.
Yeah. So when I was a kid growing up in Michigan, Monroe used to be called Frenchtown, and there's still lots of signage there that will say Frenchtown and this and that. And there's actually a trading post there. It's called Navarre Anderson Trading Post. And my grandmother was a child of a Navarre. So that was kind of tied into our family history, was a big thing there. She was big into family history, kind of came up around that. They would do things on the River Raisin Days, they would call them, and they would reenact different, battles that happened in the area. And my great-grandmother would always be there, and she'd been presented certificates and things, and I didn't understand it because, you're 6 and 7 years old. You're just there goofing off with the kids, exactly. You know what I mean, having fun. And then as time went on, you find out she's huge into genealogy, and she has this massive family tree, and so that kind of got me involved in history. My dad was way into it. He kept track of all that stuff. We've had family members in everything here since the revolution, really since the French and Indian Wars. We skipped out on Vietnam. Other than that, we've been involved in everything. I have not been involved in any military activities, fortunately, but we had a long history there. And so that ties into, specifically looking at my great-grandmother, that ties into the French roots that we have with the Navarres. And that kind of subconsciously played into the role with Brodequin, being there is such a heavy French influence there. it was not planned. It just kind of happened that way. And then one day it dawned on me. I was like, oh God, I didn't even realize that we're pulling so much stuff from French history, and we actually have a fairly decent lineage from that era. But yeah, my dad was huge into American Revolution, American Civil War, you name it. And we had family members that fought on both sides of the Civil War, so that's kind of a fascinating thing too. But when you come up around that stuff as a kid, it definitely leaves a mark, and you kind of, well, at least for me, it left a mark, and it kept me interested in history all the way up to modern history with what's going on today in the world. I stay very much plugged in to see what's going on.
And you studied history in school?
I did. So when I first started getting into school, it was science oriented. I could not shake the history bug as much as I tried. I did get back into history. What ended up happening with history was I had a fantastic relationship with my history professors. I did study history here at a university called Lincoln Memorial University. It's in Harrogate, Tennessee. Had a wonderful relationship, and we'd go out to lunch quite often. And they took me aside and said, look, here's how it is. If you're going to major in history, here's the challenges you've got. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to move around a lot more than likely, which that was a big turnoff to me because I had moved around so much as a kid. I thought, I'd just like to kind of sit in one spot for a while and then just kind of be there and try to be part of that community for a while, more than 3 or 4 years before we got to go somewhere else. So I slipped out of it, ended up getting back into science and graduated with a master's degree in environmental geoscience, and now work in a nuclear scientific world, but still very much a huge fan of history. I still read all the time, whether it be medieval or whatever. And I find it's just something that's just part of me, and I'll never be able to kick. I can't help it. It's part of who I am.
Yeah, definitely. It makes sense. And, you can see as a big influence on the band, which we'll talk about when we go through the albums. And you talk about reading. I know you have a pretty decent collection because I know you find a lot of the artwork for the albums from there, or ideas. And, when you guys, one of the goals you had when you did this band was to become like pretty much as fast as possible, right? That was one of and you guys were influenced by like 1349, Marduk, Gorgasm, Nile. I think Chad was actually friends with Pete from Nile. We just had Dallas on 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, it's cool.
And you guys do your first demo, which is probably the same 4-track you were talking about in the practice space at 99, right?
Yes. Yep, that's exactly right. Yeah.
What was the first Brodequin song ever written?
I think, okay, yeah, the first Brodequin song ever written would be the first track off Instruments, which is Spinning in Agony. That's the first one we wrote together. That was the very first one. And you're right. We were kind of like, we just want to play as fast as we can. We were big into Angel Corpses at that time too. Had seen them numerous times. We were big into Last Days of Humanity and, things like that. And we wanted to be doing similar things, as fast and as hard. We wanted to challenge ourselves as much as we could. And we kind of still feel that way in a lot of ways. We still want to play fast. It's not, we don't want to play fast just for the sake of playing fast. You know what I mean? But we do want to play fast. It's fun to play fast. There's no doubt about it. And when you're going and the drummer is just, ripping through a huge section of blast beats, it's just a riot. There's nothing like it. So we're still very much of that mindset.
And who actually designed the Brodequin logo? I know it has that kind of woodcut look thing going on.
Yeah, so I came across some text that I liked, and I thought we can probably use something like this. At the time, my brother was working at a screen printing and an embroidery shop, and one of the women that was there came across, he's saying, hey, we're kind of working on this, blah, blah, blah. She's like, hey, that's pretty cool. So she took it home over the weekend or whatever and added some line work to it and brought it back to Mike, and we were like, oh, yeah, this is perfect. We can use this, So that's kind of how that went. It was another classic case where I came to Mike with a rough idea and somehow, some way he's able to turn it into something useful,
That's a great thing. You guys do the demo. Do you remember much of recording the demo? Was it a fast process?
It was pretty quick. It was all one take stuff, 4-track. Are you ready? I'm going to hit record. One of those type of things. It was funny, when you look at it like that, you look back on it. But yeah, it was a really quick process. I mean, we were together for, probably 3 or 4 hours, just BSing and recording and get that done. And I'm sure when we were done, we went to Taco Bell or something, just laughing about it.
Because you guys, it was one thing, you guys hung out like pretty much like it was you guys like a team, right? You guys were always together.
Yeah. We were together 5-6 days a week. That's just the way it was. With Mike and Chad and I, it was super, super tight. There was no doubt about it. We were everywhere together all the time. There were not a whole lot of people that were into what we were into. And so we really had a pretty tight bond there, and Chad had a fantastic practice space at his place here in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, that his grandfather had built for him, many, many years ago. And it was fantastic. It was a room built for that specific function. And so we would go in there, and there were plenty of times where, we would rehearse 5 days a week. And sometimes we'd show up to play, and it's one of those, well, we'll go through a couple songs, and now we're going to go to the record store, or we're going to go do whatever. But yeah, we saw each other all the time. It was just the way it was.
And with the lyrics, one thing that, and I've heard you talk about this before, is you guys, how would you put this? So you guys' lyrics are written, it's all Torture lyric. The early ones, all of them are basically based around the history of the devices or the methods in these things. But this is what, with you guys didn't take the approach that a lot of bands back then were taking, the gore, which is not, we all like those bands, the gore, the blasphemy. You guys kind of went with a different angle. And was that difficult at first? Do you think, like, to the people who were digesting the band when they first started hearing the demo?
Yeah, it was tough. Especially when the demo wasn't so bad, because in the demo you're giving it away for free. And a lot of people we never got feedback from because we never met them. You know what I mean? They got it at the record store, or they ordered it through, us, and we mailed it off to them or whatnot. But when Instruments of Torture came out, it looked so different than what was going on at the time. Like you're saying, there's a ton of bands that were using the whole splatter, this, that, gore stuff. We all love those bands. There's no doubt about it. Our CD collections are full of those album covers. We wanted to do something a little bit different because it was such and is such a historical based type of band that we came at it with a different angle. We thought, well, if we're going to be talking about this and we're going to kind of portray that imagery, the logo needs to kind of match that. It would be weird to have a splattery type logo and then use this kind of, woodblock art, or like with the latest album, this fine art. It'd be kind of a strange thing. So we wanted to try and kind of marry those ideas together. And in the beginning, there was a lot of backlash against it. Like, well, this logo is not very death metal, blah, blah, blah. Or this album cover.
Was that done on purpose? Didn't you kind of want the logo to be more approachable than the music, basically? Like, it was kind of like...
Yeah, I thought that it was kind of a fun trick in some ways. Like, the logo does not look death metal. It does not. But yet we wanted to look at it like, okay, well, the logo doesn't look aggressive. It doesn't look, powerful, but the music is. And so there's kind of a little trickery involved there. And that's a lot with a lot of the kind of some of the things throughout the Middle Ages, some of these engineering things that would happen. Like, you wouldn't think now, of course, we don't think of like a ratcheting type of mechanism as anything sinister at all. But, a ratcheting mechanism changed the rack significantly. I mean, that was kind of one of those, look at this. This is nothing. This is an innocuous piece of metal. But when you attach it to a rack, it changes everything. And it was kind of a little hidden thing with the logo. You know what I mean? Like, once you got into it and got to the logo and got to the imagery, it was kind of hard to unsee, especially with the cover out, the artwork on the covers. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. Like, it looks like no big deal at first. It's all black and white. What's that? And then, oh God, okay, what's going on here? And that was kind of a thought behind the whole package, if you will. Yeah.
Almost like a history book.
Right.
Like,
yeah, right.
That's what, when you open up a history book, like or encyclopedias, and you saw the old history, those were the images that you saw from like your album covers.
Right.
I mean, that's what I think when I looked at
And they caught your attention, didn't they, when you were in
school?
Yeah, because I'm like, what the fuck?
Not because it was gory, because it was I don't know the word to use. It's not gory. It's
sadistic.
Almost like,
a lot of that.
Yes. Horror.
Right. Yeah.
Like a real horror, because that's how they, you think this is how they tortured people for real.
Right. I think it did a lot of double takes. You know what I mean? Someone would glance at it and be like, wait a minute, what's that? You know, and it kind of captured them for a moment. And after the first album, of course, when Festival of Death came around and we did the same kind of thing, you know, as far as artwork goes, now it's just expected.
Starts catching on.
You know, of course, that we'll have something like that, which is kind of the point. You know,
in '99, you guys are passing out the demo at shows, record stores, but you guys are actually like, I think you guys didn't have many local record stores. You guys pretty much had to travel out of the town to.
Yeah, we had one. It was called Disc Exchange, and it's no longer here. They had 2 locations. It was fantastic, and unfortunately, it's just no longer here.
You also dropped you also dropped records off with, we were talking about him earlier, Don Decker, from Anal Blast. Yeah. He had a record. What was it? Nightfall Records.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, Mike and I just decided, hey, let's just drive up there and dump off some demos. You know, so that's exactly what we did. You know, we went up there with a box of demo tapes and said, hey, would you mind? He's like, no, that's great. You know, thanks a lot. So we hung out for a while, BS'd, bought some things, and then drove back.
That's awesome. And you guys, so do you actually remember what was the first Brodequin show? Like, what is the first actual show? Do you actually remember the lineup with the bands you were playing?
The first one? No, that would probably have been, if I had to guess, it would be, you know, one of these classic all local bands or regional bands, you know, and it was probably in Atlanta. It was probably in Atlanta, Georgia, was probably the first show we played. We ended up playing a couple shows down there, played in Nashville one time, a couple times. We opened for Immolation there once, which was fantastic way back in the day before we knew any of those guys. You know, we were all just fans, you know. So that was a ridiculous opportunity at that time. We've actually never played Knoxville, Tennessee. We've just played all around it.
I didn't know. So you also 2000, you also got in the band called Cinery, which you joined in 2001. And you actually, that was with Matty Way, and you actually met him from a Brodequin show. You guys, opens up for Disgorged and Deeds of Flesh in Memphis?
That's right. That was one of their early Bloodletting tours, right? You know, so it was in Memphis, Tennessee. You had Moral Decay on that show, Deeds of Flesh, of course, and Disgorged, and we were the opener. And that's where we met all those guys. And at that point, you know, of course, we knew all those bands, you know, meaning hearing them, you know what I mean, but didn't really have any contact with them, but we knew of them. We had all their CDs. And Matty was a huge early inspiration when I discovered that album, because that was also right around that time when I'm trying to develop this, you know, whole vocal thing. And so he was a huge inspiration. So meeting him was a really big deal. And you know how it is when you meet people, you never know. It's not necessarily a personality thing. I wasn't concerned that, you know, meeting him, he may be like this egotistical guy. It just, to me, I never thought that we would have remained friends all these years later. I just thought it'd be a, hey, how's it going? You know what I mean? Love your work, blah, blah, blah. And play a show or two here or there with him, see him at fests or whatever. So that was a really huge thing. And it obviously over all these years doing other work with him has been fantastic. And I've loved every minute of it. When
you were with Cinery, did you join before they already have that EP written? Rituals? I know you did some backups on that, right?
Right. Yeah. The EP was already written, and Matty said, hey, do you want to, you know, get involved in this? And I said, yeah, sure. Of course. You know? And so that's kind of how that happened. I flew out to California, did the guest spots, so on and so forth. And that was that.
March 2000, the band, you guys, you guys, Brodequin put out, we're actually going to play a track from this record here in a minute. You guys put out the Instruments of Torture. So you guys are together like about a year and a half before recording that record?
Yeah, that sounds about right. You know, something like that. And again, we went through, you know, looking back on it, as much as we hung out, it probably could have come out quicker, but we were learning each other's ins and outs. You know what I mean? What each other was kind of wanting to do and how we were approaching writing and so on and so forth. And it just, that's the way that clicked. And then there were plenty of times when we were hanging out that we just hung out and didn't even play, you know, to be honest, you know what I mean? Just hanging out, having fun. And during that process, I would say by the time we recorded Instruments of Torture, we probably had 2 or 3 songs written that would be on the next album. You know, we were already going ahead and kind of making that move.
You guys go to South Carolina, to Myrtle Beach, and you guys record with Mike Sky, who was actually a musician himself. And you guys, recorded in his living room? It was like a band house.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of, craziness from those sessions, because it's exactly right. It was a band house, no doubt about it. He had his band; they all lived there. We recorded in his living room. That's where there's no separation between anything. It was just utterly ridiculous when you look back at how it was recorded. Chad did his thing, and it went great. He was done, and Mike and I did the instruments part, and it was great. And then there really weren't a whole lot of distractions during that. It went pretty well for the most part, but during the vocal recording is that's what I remember the most, because I was the most uncomfortable with that part of it. I felt completely exposed.
Some guy's heating up a pizza in the microwave. Jamie's in there screaming.
I felt extremely exposed, standing in the middle of this guy's living room, with nothing around you. You're not in a little vocal room or anything. You're literally standing here, and people are walking by, as you're trying to do your best Cookie Monster impersonation, right? And so it was really awkward. And there were a few tracks for sure. It's just where we had to go start over. Everything was one take. There's no punching. Just that's how it was, right? So you get halfway through a song, and damn it, somebody opened a refrigerator and you hear beer bottles clinging in your vocal track, and you're like, oh my God, let's do it again. And that happened numerous times, and or a microwave beeping in the back. It's like, you got to be kidding me. Yeah, it was ridiculous.
Yeah, that's great. You guys recorded that there, and you guys actually, you guys self-released that?
Yeah, we did. Yeah, the first 1,000 we did ourselves. Our dad helped us out with that and financed that. Mike ended up doing the whole Unmatched Brutality thing and paying him back for that. And then Ablated also did a version of it. Ablated Records, Brian Baxter from Ohio.
Regurgitation, yeah.
Yes, yeah.
So he did that, and you guys put it out through that, and so you guys played Nashville on that? Was it South Carolina?
Yeah, we did Nashville, South Carolina, Georgia. I think there was probably a show in Kentucky we did off that, maybe.
Castle Heights you guys did,
and
I think on that.
Castle Heights for sure. We definitely did Castle Heights a couple times. We ended up doing Ohio Death Fest off of that release.
Where'd you guys play in Florida? Because you guys did a Florida show or a couple Florida shows on that, didn't you?
Yeah, we did. I think it was somewhere in Pensacola, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
Yeah, that would have been back with also Alabama, because we did some shows with a band from there called Fleshtized, and we did several shows with them. We were in contact with Garth, who was a great guy and a great bassist, and played a few shows with them.
Okay. Did you guys start working on material for the Festival of Death pretty much right after you? Because like you said, you had a few songs done already. So was it pretty much go right into the process of getting ready to record again?
Yep, that's it. We just went right in, like, okay, the album's out, cool. Now we just start working on the second one. That's exactly right.
You guys went back to Mike Sky, who at that time was over in Daytona Beach.
Correct. Yep. That was fun. Interesting story associated with that, I guess, again, with recording and me. It couldn't have happened to anybody else. But this time we actually, the way he had it was a different house, of course, because he'd moved. This time we had separation, so we had a recording room over here where his board was, and then we had the room over here where we're going to do drums, and then we're going to do every instrument. Well, it was one of those fantastic opportunities because of where he was living. We'd get up and we'd go to the beach and, have fun doing our thing at the beach, come home, cook out some hamburgers or something like that, and then go record all night. That's just kind of the way we ran this thing. And it was really fantastic. But again, if anything's going to happen during a recording session, it's probably going to happen to me. So we were recording bass tracks. I don't know where we were. We were toward the end of the album. Only had 2 songs to go, maybe something like that. And I noticed, I was like, man, it's pretty warm in here. So I was kind of scratching my arms, because you're getting kind of sweaty. And I looked down, and I've got like 4 or 5 bumps on my arms. They look kind of like a rash or something like that. And I'm like, what the hell? Whatever, hit record. We'll do the next track, So we go through there, and I start like scratching like my chest and my back. I'm like, what the hell is going on? I'm like, I'll be right back, because I looked down at my stomach and under all of my stomach. So then I'm thinking, oh crap, if they're there, they're everywhere, right? So I'm like, I'll be right back. I gotta go to the bathroom. You know what I mean? So I come back, I'm like, we got a problem. And I'm like, and they're like, what's the problem? And so I lift my shirt up. I was like, this is the problem, And they're like, oh my God, what is that? I was like, I don't know, but I can't stop. scratching. There's no way I can do this next track. I'm freaking out. So we end up going to the emergency room, and I've got some kind of crazy rash that they think I got from being in the water. They don't know what it is. So they just give me a bunch of shots of stuff, and, you can literally watch the rash going away while you're sitting there.
Oh, wow.
It was pretty crazy. But by the time we got back, it was probably 4 a.m. or something by the time we got back. I was like, there's no way I'm recording this. So the last track actually on Festival of Death, Mike recorded the bass for because I just ended up going to bed and they went back in the booth and recorded it. But always something.
Well, we're gonna play a song from the Instruments of Torture, the 2000 record. We're gonna play Spinning in Agony, and then we'll come right back with Jamie on the Tampa Morgue. We'll talk more about the Festival of Death record. Be right back after this track. There you go. That was Spinning in Agony off the Instruments of Torture record. Came out in 2000. Now, going back to the Festival of Death, Jamie, you guys also, when you were recording that record, now, obviously Mike Sky passed away. You guys had a really good friendship with this guy. You guys were actually, going to bars afterwards and doing like cover sets at the local bars during the recording process?
Yeah, I mean, it happened. And that actually, unfortunately, I missed out on that because I was passed out under the heavy influence of whatever drugs they shot me up with at the hospital. So I was sleeping, and him and Chad and Mike all went out to some bar and were doing cover songs and everything. And I'm sure it was pure chaos. I wish I could have been there for that, but I don't know. It was, I heard stories from them, and it sounds like it was a riot. They were all switching instruments. Mike's playing drums on some songs, and Chad's playing guitar, and I'm sure it was a sight to behold.
And Mike Sky, like I said, I know he passed away, and he was great to work with. I had read, you had said, because he obviously had the ear for music. He was a musician also, but like,
right.
What were your memories of working with him on those two albums?
So, it's kind of funny, right? When you think about people in music, and, he was not a death metal guy, but he was friends with a guy, meaning Chad, that's how we met him, with a guy who was clearly a death metal guy. And you never know the personality types you're going to get associated with death metal. Of course, like, how it is. People think everybody's some kind of monster or whatever. But I remember with Sky, he was extremely kind. You know, like there was no, he made you feel very comfortable. You know, there was no worry of like, man, I messed that up or whatever. It's like, yeah, whatever, don't worry about it. Here we go. And it was extremely calm and relaxed. And this was all out of his home. So he brought us into his house. You know, we stayed there. He's feeding us. We're hanging out, watching TV and all this. And he's taking us to the beach and everything. You know, it was just a really great time and a great experience. And I don't know that there'll ever be another experience quite like that as far as I'm concerned. You know, recording. It was just, you really couldn't ask for a better guy than that. He was a really, really, I just remember being excessively kind, you know, and kindness is one of those things that's actually a character trait, right? Like, you know, somebody can be nice, but that doesn't mean they're actually nice. That could be a strategic play, yeah. You know, whereas with him, it was just legitimate kindness.
And did you feel on this record that you guys, the act was a little more complex than the first one?
Yeah, the riffs were definitely much more complex. It was far more challenging to record this album from a technical aspect, from a performance aspect than Instruments of Torture. You know, Mike was writing some much more in-depth material than we had on the first one. So it was definitely challenging.
And you also, earlier you mentioned The Last Days of Humanity, and you guys did a cover, a hidden track on that one also. Yep. And you also put that on the the 4-split that we'll talk about coming up was on that also. And you guys, again, wanted to control pretty much what was happening with your releases, right? So you guys wanted to, again, kind of release it yourselves.
Yeah. That, you know, we kind of, after we had done that, it kind of was, there's pros and cons, right? You know, you're going to have limited exposure depending on who you know. I mean, everything was trading back then. There's still a tremendous amount of trading today with different distros. You know, you send us 10 copies of this, we're going to do 10 copies of that, you know, or whatever the case may be. But it gave us that ability to control every aspect of it. We didn't have to worry what the cover art was, or if some label were to say, well, yeah, that's cool, but we'd rather you use this. You know, that was kind of one of those things we didn't want to deal with. We didn't want to deal with having to be told what kind of album cover we could have, or if we could do Last Days of Humanity covers, for example, or whatever the case may be. We just felt it best just to keep it close to ourselves and retain all the control.
And then Mike you guys basically have a label because Mike, he formed Unmatched Brutality Records.
That's correct. Yeah, we were a direct result of that. You know, he had the Broderick and stuff, and then he had Wretch from California back in the day, early drum machine band, you know. And then it spawned from there. You know, I mean, he had lots of releases after that.
And you were doing like a lot of the layouts for that label, right? You were doing the artwork designs and stuff.
Yep, that was another one of those things where it's like we have a role that we need to have filled. We have to have somebody that can do these layouts, and we had some trouble early on back in the Hollow days with some of the cover art that we wanted to use with designers saying, oh, I'm not comfortable working with this. And I thought, man, we can't have that. You know, if you're going to be releasing bands, we can't have anybody say, well, I'm not going to work with that, especially when you're having to pay them. So here's even more, right? More expense. So I was just like, well, this will give me an opportunity to learn how to use this software. So then I got big into, you know, Adobe Photoshop, Illustrator, et cetera, and was doing all the layouts to save money and to save frustration.
Good idea. I mean, you guys started doing that, and that time period was there a little bit different? Like, you know, these days I don't know how it really works, but back then labels kind of got along. Like it was kind of like a bond.
It's funny you should say that because you're right. There was a lot more. I guess you'd say support. There was a lot more. Man, you know, Ed's got a label, and I want his label to do awesome. So I'm trading everything with him. You know, now these CDs might sit on my shelf for 2 or 3 years, but I don't care because we're trying to help move his stuff. He's trying to help move our stuff. And there was a lot more of that kind of, you know, help each other out, where now it seems there's a lot more competition, you know, and I'm not sure where that comes from, but it seems to be that way to me.
It's more like selfishness.
Yeah,
it really is. People just care about themselves now because they think that they're, I don't know if it's an ego thing. I just think people are just honestly selfish today.
I mean, that could very well be what it is. And it spills over. You know, I was told early on when we were first coming back a really good friend of ours, Sean from Putrid Pile. You know, I was talking to him and he's like, hey man, he's like, you're not going to have any problems. It's going to be fine. But I'm going to tell you, it's not like it was back in the day. And I said, well, what are you talking about? And he started highlighting things you're talking about right here. He's like, it's just different. He's like, you're going to know when you get out there, you're going to feel it's different. There's a lot more competition between bands. It's not back in the day like it was, you know, hey bro, we're helping you out and blah, blah, blah. We're going to get you on this show and, you know, X, Y, Z and do whatever we can. He said, it's a lot more dog eat dog right now. And I thought that's interesting. And he was 100% right.
Well, even doing shows, bands don't remember before. It's like, hey, you need gear? You can use my gear. Now people are like, you're not using my stuff. I'm just like, what are we talking about here? There's some bands that don't even tour with gear, like DRI. You know, they just go in a van and use the opening band stuff. Could you imagine?
Yeah, no, you're right.
No,
you're right. The first Ohio Death Fest we were at, my bass rig was on stage all day. Every band used it. I didn't care. You know, here you go. You got bands flying in from all over the place. They're not bringing their gear. You know, they're bringing their guitars for the most part and stuff like that. We get that, but they're not bringing a lot of their stuff. And so it was up there. I can't remember who played after us, asked if they could use it. Yeah, of course. And I just left it up there all day, you know, whatever. But you're right. There's been a couple times where we've flown to different places and the assumption is, and it's even been mentioned by the promoter, yeah, we got you. Don't worry about it. Just bring, you know, your guitars and cymbals or whatever. And we get there. There's no backline at all. And you have to go ask the bands about it. And there is a moment of like, well, they're not so sure they want to let that happen. And I thought that was pretty interesting. Because like you're saying, back in the day.
I didn't notice that back in the day. When you would play with bands, everyone would swap shit. It was just a whole different.
Oh, yeah.
You talk about with the help of the labels, you actually, who's actually passed away also, Rich from, was with Flesh Grind. You know, he was with United Guttural. He was the first person to actually ever carry wholesale Brodequin. He actually was the first person to purchase from you guys wholesale back then.
Yeah, Rich was the early on supporter. It goes back to what we were just talking about. You know, here he had United Guttural. He had a ton of great bands on United Guttural back in the day, you know, and he was the first guy, like early on, the official first guy, if you will, that was buying wholesale CDs from us, wholesale shirts, you know, et cetera, et cetera. Excuse me. And huge supporter. It was one of those things that was, to us, because we were fans of United Guttural, it was super cool that he was interested in this stuff. And that's how other people kind of got to our stuff. You know, Jesse Kehoe, a good friend of ours, found our stuff. Rich said, hey, you should check this out. Then Jesse said, hey, to John Ingman, he said, hey, you should check this band out. I think you might like this band. And that was back in Instruments of Torture day. So here you go again with, back in the day, it was about connections, right? And it still is about connections, but the connections were different then because the connections had to be almost referred to you where you had to know somebody. Whereas now you can just click on a link or whatever, and you're good to go. Wasn't like that back then. I maybe it's one of those things, but it did seem like back then those connections meant more than they do now.
No, I definitely agree. And you know what he sold? Now, Rich sold United Guttural went to Deathgasm, right? In like 2005, I think.
That's correct. Yeah, that's correct. Yeah,
I think it was in 2005. But with Unmatched Brutality, you guys also dealt with some shit. Like I said, you can always say what you want and don't want, but you guys had an employee who kind of fucked up your guys the label for a while. You guys lost I read like 80% of revenue.
Yeah, it was brutal. Totally unbeknownst to us. You know, it's one of those things where at that time things were getting so busy for Mike and they were going so well that it was impossible for him to handle it on his own. It was impossible for the two of us to handle it on our own. So we had to bring somebody in, and we did. And you know, this person was a very trusted person, a very well-known person to the family. Everything seemed great. And for the first, I'd say, year or so, everything was running just as normal. Everything was on the up and up. You know, things were increasing as far as sales and bands and attention and et cetera, et cetera. And then we started getting emails, hey, I didn't get my order. And we thought, well, okay, that happens all the time. All the time, something slips through a crack in a post office and it's gone, never to be seen again. So you just ship out another CD. You say, hey, okay, whatever, we ship another CD, or you refund them, especially if it's something you just don't have anymore. But then when it really came down, and long story short, when the employee was let go, we found hundreds of packages that were never sent.
Damn.
Now, what's really weird about it was all these packages, I'd say probably 75% of these packages were all labeled. The postage was already on them. They were done. They were fully packaged, sealed. Postage is paid. It's sitting right here. All that had to happen was them being taken to the post office. It was incredible. It was devastating. It really was the beginning of the end of the label. It made it virtually impossible to recover from that kind of a shot, especially back, here we go again with back then, where you do have those connections and you've got that word of mouth and you've got that trust aspect. And then all of a sudden that got completely stripped away. We have a major problem. And there wasn't a whole lot that could be done with that, to be honest. And now when you look at things, the insane cost of shipping and everything else, it's just not even fair anymore as a small label, because you can't really offer the bands anything anymore if you expect to make a penny. Oh. And all we were doing when we kind of came back around and started doing it again, all that was happening was one release was financing the next. There's no money. It was just, well, we're going to release this band, and the proceeds from that release will release the next band. And that's kind of how we were. Now, back before everything went crazy, it wasn't like that for Mike. That was his full-time job. It was profitable. Things were great until they weren't, and that's just kind of how that went. But yeah, it was devastating. It changed everything. It was a bad time.
Yeah, it's and that time period, what you guys are finishing, also going back to the band, Brodequin, you guys finished the Festival of Death. And at that time, when you guys were in the studio sessions, basically Mike and Chad started not getting along, right? You guys kind of knew that it was time to make the change.
Right. It was hard to explain, and again, that was a fairly, painful experience too, because at that point, we were nonstop together, like I said. So it was more than this is just a guy in a band with you. We've all been in bands like that, where there's a guy, he just shows up and rehearses and we play shows and stuff. There's not really a whole lot of connection there. There is musically, and we maybe be in the same stuff and we hang out now and then. But with Chad, it was like a family member. We were together nonstop. And it's hard to put my finger on it. And I've thought about it numerous times over the years and been asked about it numerous times over the years. And it's hard to put my finger on exactly what happened, but the disagreement started happening. There seemed to be, and maybe I'm totally wrong. It would be interesting to get his aspect or somebody else's aspect. I don't know if he was starting to feel that we weren't appreciative enough of what he was doing. I really don't know. But when it started to go, it went rapidly. It was not a long drawn out, we need to talk about this, blah, blah, blah. It was just like somebody flipped.
Was that happening at the digital studios? You could see this happening already?
Yeah, that's exactly what was happening. So I was there for all the recording process. We came home, and then Mike and Chad ended up going back to the mixing part. I didn't go back because of work. I couldn't go. I took all my time off to do the recording. They went back, and when Mike came back, he was like, yeah, this we can't go on like this. And I was like, oh God, so I kind of I really felt kind of caught in the middle of that. You know what I mean? Because it's like, well, what am I going to do here? So here's my brother who I've been playing music with forever. I clearly have to look at it from his point of view, but I also have to look at it from Chad's point of view. What's going on? I don't understand what's going on. And it was a complete communication meltdown. And then that was just it. I really, at that point, looking back on it, I would have probably handled it differently now. But back then, I literally kind of put my hands up and said, you guys need to figure this out. I'm caught in the middle here, and I don't want to be here. You guys got to figure this shit out. And it never got figured out. That's kind of how we ended up where we were at. It kind of came down to they just cannot work together. And that's where it was at.
And that was during the making of I'm actually going to play a song now. I'm going to play Flow of Maggots off the Festival of Death record 2001. And then we'll be back with Jamie to talk more about Brodequin right after this track on the Tampa Morgue. We'll be right back with you. There you go. That was Flow of Maggots off Festival of Death from Brodequin. Came out in 2001 on Unmatched Brutality Records. So the guy who took over the drums wasn't a stranger to you and Mike, right? You guys had met John earlier at Ohio Death Fest, which basically started out over a Mayhem sticker, the conversation.
Yeah, back in that time period, Mike had a Mayhem sticker on his guitar. And John was and still is a big black metal fan, you know. And he came up after our set and started talking to Mike about Mayhem and other black metal bands and kind of hit it off. And he said, hey, here's a copy of my band's demo. And we're like, oh, cool. You know, well, Mike was cool. Great. So we got it and we listened to it on the way home and it was cool. We thought it was
that Storm
stuff.
Blast or the Cold Beyond?
It was Cold Beyond. That's right. Yeah. And so we're like, this is pretty cool. You know, and he's a cool guy and, you know, all was good, but didn't really think much beyond that, right? You meet a lot of people at shows, you get a lot of demos, and you just think, okay, this is another one of those situations.
Okay, so.
But as time went on and we found ourselves in the situation we were sitting there going, it felt like, here we go again, right? You know, here we are again in Knoxville, and we're looking for a drummer. We're looking for a drummer, the hardest of all spots to fill, you know? And we just thought, oh my God, you know what? This could be it. You know, I mean, this could be it. So then I said, hey, wait a minute. Whatever happened to that demo you got from that guy, you know? And he goes, oh, you mean John? I said, yeah. I said, where's that at? And he found it and we broke it out and we listened to it, you know, a dozen times talking about it, you know, okay, what do you think? You know, this, that, and the other, going back and forth. And so I said, you gotta get in touch with him, you know, see if we can do something with this guy, you know? So he did, and the funny thing about that was we drove up to Milwaukee, which is where he was at, and John thought it was like an audition, like, you know, he's trying out for this spot, And Mike and I had already decided this is not an audition. We're just showing up to jam, you know? So we get there and we play.
Did you guys give him songs to know or anything like that? Or was just.
Yeah, you know, we probably did. I think we probably told him, like, or asked him rather, pick 3 or 4 songs. Any 3 or 4 songs you want. Doesn't matter to us. And we'll just show up and play them. So he picked 3 or 4 songs and we played them and it was all great. And I think he was a little surprised when we said, okay, well, you know, let's start looking at writing new material. I think he was like, well, wait a minute, you know, but he was in before we got in the car. You know what I mean? We weren't going to drive all the way to Milwaukee just to be like, oh, never mind, you know? So he was in anyway. And it was just one of those really fortunate meetings, right? I mean, what if he decided not to go to Ohio Death Fest that year?
Exactly.
You know, there's so much with this stuff that's just crazy. And if people made a different decision, you wouldn't be in the spot you're in.
It's exactly. You could totally see that. And you guys, what was the first show with John?
Oh, that's a good question. Let's see. Was it? I think I'm pretty sure we played a show in Milwaukee, like just a warm up show, you know, because he lived there anyway. We drove up there to be working on material, and I think we just played a show there. The first big show, if you will, with John that we did would have been the first Maryland Death
2003,
Fest.
right?
That would have been, yeah, that would have been the first like big show.
What was some of those bands on that? What was that? So it was like Devourment, right? Suffocation.
Yeah, Suffocation.
Mortal Decay.
Abuse was on that. Wretch was on there. Yeah, there was a ton of bands on there. That was a really crazy time to see that. I mean, it was good stuff, man.
And you guys also 2002, prior to that, you guys put out, we were talking about earlier, the 4-way split with Aborted, Brodequin, Drowning, and Misery Index. That was on the French label Bone Brigade Records. How did you guys get involved with that split?
So that was one of those situations where with Unmatched Brutality, Mike had been trading with Bones Brigade for a while, you know, and so they had developed a relationship, professional, and, you know, they were friends, they were buddies, you know, they were emailing outside of work, so to speak, you know, trades and whatnot. And when he had this idea of a split, he just approached us and we were like, yeah, of course, you know, never even gave it a second thought.
You guys put the Last Days of Humanity cover on there and the Dead Infection cover.
Yep.
And you said you like Maryland Death Fest. You guys So you guys did a Canadian mini tour also that same time period?
Yeah, there was a small little tour we did on that. That was a lot of fun. Got to go to some places we'd never been before. You know, Rimouski, Canada was one of those places that was completely unexpected. You know, you kind of show up in this little town, think not a whole lot of it, and the place just goes nuts. You know, it was all the shows were great, really. It was a good time.
You guys also did a tour with there was a tour you guys kind of lost your asses on that one too. It was like with SCD. You guys also did the same year? Was that?
Yeah, we did one with Vomit Remnants and Morgue from France, and that was a rough one. That was a pretty rough one. You know, that we would show up to some places and there would be no show, or we would play the show and then the promoter would disappear with, I say all the money, but you know what I mean. You know, they would disappear with whatever money was there, and so, you know, we felt very responsible. You've got 2 bands. You know, you're talking 8 or 9 guys that are coming from other parts of the world that have, some speak very good English, some speak no English. And so we felt very responsible for them. And when you found yourself in a position where, even though there was very little money to be spread around, that money would go into the gas tank, or that money would go to get them, you know, something off the dollar menu at McDonald's, you know what I mean? So we found ourselves digging in, to our own pockets and trying to help put gas and food, you know, toward these bands. And it was, you know, you can't, there was no way you could sustain that, you know. I mean, you're talking, everybody at the time was working, you know, well, either temporary jobs or minimum wage type jobs or whatever. So you're barely, when you hit the road leaving, you're barely scraping by, and you're really counting on that merchandise or whatnot to kind of get you through. The problem with that, of course, is once you spend all your money from merchandise, is you can't replenish that. You know what I mean? So it was just a lose-lose.
Been there many times.
Yeah, you know how it is.
We were in an RV on tour, and it broke down in Colorado, and we finished in a U-Haul in the dead of winter. 3 people in the back, 3 people in the front. and
Oh.
switching off for 2.5 weeks, going from Seattle all the way ending in Texas. So it's either you were in dead cold or dead heat. And
yeah, man.
dude, trust me, got home and guess how much money got in my pocket? Duck eggs, nothing.
Yep,
nothing.
I know.
So
I know.
it sucks. I mean, and you're out with a band like we were out with Cannibal Corpse. So it was, but when you take into consideration renting the U-Haul, how much that cost, and then leaving a giant RV we owned in Colorado. I mean, nothing. But it finish the tour, you go home, right? I mean, that's what the business is. We were young, we didn't know. Who knew? This is 2000. You just buck up, soldier, and finish the tour.
Yep. That's right.
Yeah.
So, and Jamie, you guys lost like a windshield that tour. You guys had like a bunch of shit happen, didn't you?
Yeah, that was, the stupid things you do, right, when you're younger. And when you're trying to save money is kind of a funny story that I don't recommend any bands do. But it was one of those, we had to rent the van because we didn't have anything. So we rented the van here from Knoxville Airport. And again, I don't recommend anybody do this. We told them, we're just going to use it locally. We're not going anywhere. Well, shit, we're in Texas and we're coming onto the highway and a rock comes up and chips the windshield. I'm like, uh-oh, we've got a problem. And you could watch this thing just start spreading across the window. You could literally watch it crawling, And so we ended up like, what are we going to do? It's the sunlight. You know what I mean? The sun beating down on it. We got to do something. This is so insane. So we ended up duct taping a bunch of socks and clothing across that crack to slow it down. Miraculously, it did slow it down. But it looks ridiculous, of course, And it's a matter of time before you're going to get pulled over with T-shirts duct taped to your windshield, So we've got a problem. What are we going to do? I call the insurance company, the rental car company rather, and say, hey, what would we do if, hypothetically speaking, of course, if a rock came up and hit your windshield? And she goes, well, did that happen? Oh, well, no, I'm just curious what we would do if that were to happen. And she goes, well, if it were to happen, and she knew it happened, of course, you just need to get it back and we'll swap out the car. Just bring it in tomorrow and we'll get you a new one. And I'm like, holy shit. She said, bring it in tomorrow. We're in Texas, So at that moment, we just decided. Now, of course, I was the only one that was listed on the stupid rental. So I was the only one that could drive. So
you're stressed as shit.
With the way things, right. So I'm like, well, let's strap in. And so we drove straight to Knoxville and went to the airport and dumped that thing off and got a new one. Got about, 3 or 4 hours of sleep and drove all the way back out.
Wow.
I mean, that was brutal. And again, keep in mind, all we're doing is losing on this tour. I mean, that was all a loss, and then you get that on top of it. It was nuts.
Oof, that's a crazy.
It's ridiculous.
At the same time period, 2003. Can you tell us how? So I know it's Mike, and John joined up with Maddie, and you guys put together Liturgy.
Yeah, that was it. Maddie and I had been friends for a long time. We had talked several times about doing something. And he said, hey, what do you think about this? And I thought, well, yeah, as a coincidence, we kind of have a full band over here that we can use to do this. So that's how that happened. It was pretty seamless. And we had written all the music, and then Maddie came out and we rehearsed, 3-4 times, something like that, to make sure everything sounded good. We drove up to Milwaukee. We did a practice show there. Liturgy played a practice show, and then we started recording the next day.
And that was the Dawn of the Ash record.
That's right.
So when you guys wrote that, did you and Mike pretty much put it all together and then kind of brought it to the other guys?
For the most part. And then Maddie had, just a boatload of lyrics and things that he wanted to use, and the whole concept and stuff like that, comes from Maddie. But yeah, I mean, it went together fairly well, pretty quickly.
You guys also played, was that so what, 2004 you guys played Fuck the Commerce Festival with Liturgy?
That sounds right. Yeah, that sounds right to me. Yeah. So we did a double duty there. Brodigan played one night and Liturgy played the other night.
And you had actually played, you played the year, was it the year prior you had played with Disgorge? You filled in?
That's right. Yeah, that's right. The year prior I was there with Disgorge. It was my first exposure to Europe in general, and definitely that festival. Yeah.
How did you like? Because I know the Fuck at the Commerce Festival's done now, right? How was the festival like? Was that a good time?
I thought it was great. Yeah. Again, it was my first experience, so you take that into consideration and how that affects your perception of it. But it was fantastic. I mean, to be filling in for a band that, you know, to me was a massive inspiration, was nuts. And all the guys in the band were so cool and just so nice that it made it an unbelievably great experience. Same with the guys in Deeds of Flash. You know, we stayed with them for several days and before the tour started, and all those guys were just so great, you know, welcoming and just laid back guys. But yeah, Fuck the Commerce was fantastic. And then that's kind of how we made the connection to play there the next year with Brodequin and Liturgy.
And with Liturgy, you guys played Las Vegas Death Fest in 2019?
Yep, that sounds correct to me too. Yeah, we did that. We played a couple new tunes there, and then things kind of took a little bit of a break, obviously, on that. But yeah, it was fun. You know, again, to get together and jam was great.
And do you have a whole, like, is there like a whole Liturgy album written already? Another record?
There is right now. So all the instruments have been recorded. The vocals have not been recorded. Maddie and I are still working on the ins and outs of how exactly we want to do that. There's, you know, some discussion. Maybe I'll just go out his way and record vocals with him out there, or maybe I'll just record here and still end up going out there anyway. You know what I mean? To hang out while he's doing it. I don't know. We'll see what happens with that. But we're still kind of bouncing around exactly. And we're looking at what parts each person wants to do, you know.
And back to Brodequin now. You guys also, you guys go do the Canada tour, and is that pretty much you guys get back and start working on the Methods of Execution record?
Yeah, we started right there, and we moved rapidly through that. There were times when we would get together with John. I think in the most productive session, we got together with John over a weekend, and we wrote 4 songs. It was just, you know, we would hit a flow with John and it would just take off. It was really, really extraordinary.
I think I had heard you say in an interview once that with John and Mike too, those two worked great together.
They did. They worked wonderfully together. They kind of knew where each other wanted to go. You know, Mike could kind of anticipate, oh, okay, well, John's going to want to go this way with this pattern or whatever. And yeah, they worked wonderfully together, man. It was great.
On this record, you worked with a guy, was actually, I think, he was in the band The Cold Beyond with John. Tim Blesky was his name?
That's right. Yep. We recorded at his house again, another home studio type situation. He had a really nice little studio there. It was a comfortable place to be. It was a good experience there as well.
And you know, we talk about what the album covers. I noticed the album art, and this one was a little different than the previous releases you guys did. And you had actually put that together, right? And that involved was, you know, we're from New Jersey. That actually involved Martha M. Place, who was the first woman that was actually killed in the electric chair, right, in like 1899.
Yep, that's correct. Yep, that's right. You're 100% right. Yeah, and then the wheel and the saw on the cover are a couple pieces that were mine. I just laid them out and shot pictures of them. Just, you know, overlaid it. We just kind of took we went a little more abstract on that one. You know what I mean? Just to try and experiment and see what we felt about it. And then we were like, okay, let's just go back to what we do better.
And was that, with recording wise, was that just a smooth album to record for you?
Yeah, it went really well. I think, you know, everybody worked well there. John may have been a little bit nervous just because it was his first recording with us, and he was recording with his friend, and, you know, so there was pressure there. But it went really smooth. I don't recall there being any train wrecks. You know what I mean? Everything went all right. It was, again, a good experience, and I'm sure we probably would have recorded with Tim again had things kind of lined up, because he was very good at what he did, and made you feel really comfortable at home.
Did you guys do many shows off that record?
We did a few, you know, I mean, not a whole lot, but a few. And then, you know, things started getting a little bit more challenging with getting out and about. So we kind of had the brakes on that a little bit, but yeah, we did several.
It was probably around 2005, I guess it was. So the band and you guys then would deal with something else, which, you know, this was like kind of a pattern for you guys. Eventually you guys would come. I mean, you could tell me if I'm right or not, but so John just picked up and kind of took off one day, packed up and I know you guys are cool now, and John's, which we'll talk about, which John has been involved with the band again. Yeah. And, it's pretty much like you guys had no idea you guys just came back and he was gone.
Yeah, so okay, this kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier with the individual that was working at the label and we had issues. Okay. So this person also was involved to some aspect of band communications. Well, or at least was privy to band communications, right? Not dealing directly with promoters or whatever. But at the time there was discussion that we were going to go over to Japan, and we were all excited about Japan. That's a place I've wanted to go since I was a kid, um, and so it was looking like we were going to go. And then there was a little bit of confusion, maybe language barrier or whatever, Mike and the promoter talking or whatnot. And so this person we're talking about had relayed to John that Mike and I said, the hell with it, we're not going to Japan. It's not going to happen. And John was all amped to go. He was ready to go. We were all ready to go. And he was making moves to get things set up to go. And he was very upset about that. And I guess something else was going on. And yeah, just one day he was just gone. He was in.
And you guys got along great. Like there was, I've always read you guys. Like definitely the band was definitely no problems.
Yeah, no problems at all. So here we go again with some kind of. Well, first of all, there was some kind of misinformation heading his way from this person, without a doubt. But then also there was this kind of communication breakdown, of like, what the heck's going on? You know what I mean? So I don't know. It's one of those things where it's unfortunate. But water under the bridge. Everything's cool with John. I talk to him all the time. He's actually helped me on several things with different electronics and working with samples.
And he was also having a lot of issues. Like we had a hip and back issue.
Yeah, he did, and he still does, unfortunately. I was hoping that would be something that would get worked out, but he still struggles with that.
Yeah, and like I said, I know he got involved with the band again, which we'll talk about. But you guys had planned. So when this happened, you guys had kind of planned to bring a German drummer in, but that didn't kind of pan out for you guys.
No, what happened really was it was super brief. It was discussion. We knew he was a good guy. We knew he was capable, so on and so forth. And it just didn't work out. Just plain and simple, just did not work out. I mean, that's a stretch. It's hard enough to work with a guy who lives, several states away. But when you're talking about that, it's going to be nearly impossible.
Yeah, and you guys, and personally, I know you guys, which Ed's just dealt with this year, actually, the last year and a half. And like I said, we don't have to get too much into it. But I know for you guys, you have this going on. You have the band changes, and then you guys start dealing with a lot of personal, like, a lot of family stuff that happens to all of us eventually when our family starts to age and just health problems. And that was, I'll let you say whatever you want to say about it, but you had a lot of stuff put on you and Mike's plate at that time period.
Yeah, without going down the actual timeline, you look at, because I talk about it because we all deal with it at some point, and maybe some people are dealing with it now, and, we all have to process it our own way. But we basically, our entire family evaporated in the course of about 6 years, So it was just, everybody's gone. Mike and I are all left. That's it. There's no uncles, grandparents, parents. It's all gone, And when it starts to go, you're of course not thinking everybody's going to be gone. You know what I mean? You're not thinking that. But there was just zero time to recuperate. Like what happened was somebody get sick, they go in the hospital, they pass away. Okay, that is what it is. You process that, and then all of a sudden, 2 months later, the same thing.
And some of this was unexpected for you, right? It was not like a...
Totally. Yes, some was totally unexpected. Just completely out of the dark, right? You're not even thinking this is going to happen. And yeah, it's a lot to process. It's a lot to deal with. You're not truly over the first one when you're dealing with another one, and it's a lot to deal with. It became impossible to even think about writing music. It was like, how much time, we all know how much time a band takes, how much dedication and time is involved in this. And when you're dealing with this, and now you're having to deal with family members' estates.
And that is, I've dealt with that. It's a very, very, very vicious cycle.
It is. You get it. And so there's just not a whole lot of time left to do anything else. Plus, you're working on top of all this. It's not like you're only doing this, So, and again, everybody processes it differently. It takes longer for others and so on and so forth. different family members hit harder than others. It's just the way it is. You know what I mean? It's you may have a distant uncle that you know him, but it's not like your mom.
Yeah, and
you know what I mean?
From what it sounds like,
So
your
even
parents
though
you guys were very close. They were so supportive.
Right. Exactly right. And then we were also having to travel to other states to take care of their property or their estate. You know what I mean? Their checking accounts or whatever bills they had or whatnot. We'd have to go down there and take care of that and get that going. We had a situation where, with our uncle, his house was empty, obviously, because he passed away. And while we were trying to get things taken care of, somebody broke into the house. So now we're dealing with that, and it's just one thing after the other. And it was kind of like you just throw your hands up and you say, I can't do all this. I gotta take 5 here. We just gotta take a break. Once everything calms down, we'll come back in and do it. And then, not to dwell on that stuff, but then you're good, right? Everything's good. You think things are good, and then they're not because you forgot. Oh man, you know what we forgot to do? We forgot to go deal with all their clothing. Oh, great. Let's go deal with all the clothing and personal items. You know what I mean? And so that starts everything all over again, and then you got to come down off that. So it takes time. And to be honest, in a lot of ways, not only is it a mental thing, but it takes a toll on you physically as well. It's going to affect your sleep, which is going to affect everything, so it's going to affect your job. It's going to affect
has to affect you wanting to,
kind of where we were.
To write, at that point, I would think that you're just mentally drained where you don't even want to focus on, a band at that time.
You're exactly right. You're drained. You're tapped out. There's not a whole lot left. You're kind of in a mode of, at least me, Mike may have been a little different. I'll speak for myself. It kind of was a situation of, I get up, I go to work, I fake it at work, because I don't care. And then I come home and I get something to eat and I go to bed. There were honestly days where, I was probably in bed by 6:30. I didn't have to be, I didn't get up for work till 8. You're just shot, you're just shot. And so when you find yourself in that situation, that's where you're at. And there's points where, again, speaking for myself, there's points where it got pretty dark, and every now and then it still does get dark. It's one of those things where it can be a lot to deal with even today, honestly, just being purely honest about it, but so it was impossible. And then when we found ourselves in a spot where, hey, the clouds kind of lifted, we can kind of get back into this. That's where we found ourselves. But again, you come into personnel challenges.
So would you and Mike just start just getting together, just you two, just kind of tossing around some stuff, hanging out, jamming again a little bit, trying to get back into that groove?
Yeah, that's exactly it. And throughout the years, we would, maybe we would sit down and come up with a riff or two, but it was nothing serious, But then when we got back together and said, hey, let's do this, it kind of was, it was almost like we never stopped. Like we'd written music for so many years together that once we started going again, it was just all the dominoes were falling into place.
You guys decide, and what's cool too is you guys also, when you guys decide to do Brodequin again and really focus on it, you guys get a hold of John again.
Right. That's the first person we reached out to. And he said straight up, he's like, well, the situation. And I said, yeah, I know. But, John's a friend. I'm not going to turn my back on John. I want to give him a chance to do this. Because if he can do it,
was he able to play like for a little bit of time and not a full set? Was there or just he had to be done completely from jamming on the drums?
He was done. There was no way he would make it through a song. The pain would not make it possible. So we said, let's give it a shot. We're all willing to give it a shot. And we went up to Milwaukee again, and we did our thing. And we said, okay, let's do this. Let's give it a shot. And we did our best, and we did the best we could do with it. John stepped away from it because he felt that it was holding the band back. He said, this is not good for you guys. me playing drums like this is
For those who
good.
don't know, John was
People
using
don't
the
wanna
MIDI
see
pads,
that.
right? Which is
Yeah,
hard as shit to do. He was actually,
hard as
yeah.
hell to do. Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's not like there was a misconception from some. He's not hitting a button like a drum machine. He is striking the pad for everything he's doing. He's performing this. Some people thought it was amazing. Most people did not. And he thought it was a real detriment to the band. So he thought, for the best thing for the band was he was going to step away from it.
And he was getting some good praise, but he was also getting some shitty messages from people too. Because we all know how the internet people are.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly right. And you know what? Again, going back to mental space, if you're waking up every day and you look at your phone and you've got 20 or 30 Facebook messages all talking about how you suck and you should just quit and blah, 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 that's going to take a toll on anybody. And he was just like, yeah, it's just better for you guys if I don't do this. And we said, okay, we'll accept that. We hated it because John's a friend. He still is a friend. But again, I wasn't going to not. Mike and I, there was no way we weren't going to reach out to John first.
I thought it was awesome that you guys did that, because a lot of people, these days would just move on to the next. I mean, you guys actually, stuck it out with one of your guys, and it's and you got, like you said, you and John are awesome now still. So it's so it's definitely cool. And 2019, you also played with Gorgasm live.
Yeah, they asked me if I'd fill in for a show in Brazil, and I thought absolutely, because Gorgasm's another one of those bands that early on I just was spinning their stuff all the time. We saw them at Milwaukee Metal Fest. Mike and I did before they had anything out, and I was blown away. Like, these guys are amazing. So to go play with them and play some songs that I really like was a great time.
Yeah, it's definitely cool. And and then when obviously John left, but he actually recommended Jan to you, who actually played a few years. I think he went. How long did he play? 3 years with you guys?
Yeah, about 3, I'd say. Yeah, we did some shows with him for sure. We did several shows with him. And Jan's a great guy. He's now working as a barber, if I'm not mistaken. He's
really?
Bounced around a couple places. Yeah, but he's a great dude, and he's fast as hell, without a doubt. He can play quick. It's one of those things, again, where you're talking so far away, it's very difficult to make things happen. The time change alone, when we're talking about even just file sharing and so on and so forth, it just really bogs things down. And he got to a position where he needed to focus on things that he was doing to improve himself. Okay, perfect, fine. If you're gonna, do things to improve your life, I'm not gonna stop you from doing that. There's no way. So that's just kind of
what you guys did do. Quebec.
You
guys did Quebec Death Fest together. You guys played South America together.
Yep, that's correct.
So you guys.
Yep, we did a bunch of stuff together, no doubt about it. And he was a great guy to travel with too. Same with Joaquin. Great guys to travel with. Completely dependable. You never have to wonder. A lot of us have had that guy or seen bands that have that guy that just.
And Joaquin's still involved, right, for your guys live?
No, Joaquin is not involved anymore. No, when he joined in, he was very, very upfront with, if Mike ever wants to come back, I'm more than happy with stepping out of the way. Because Joaquin's a fan of the band, and I thought that was a real big thing for him to say when he started off, because a lot of people wouldn't take that kind of position, And when Mike had expressed, wanting to get back involved, Joaquin actually came to Knoxville for a work thing. We all went out to dinner and were hanging out, and it was a completely cool thing. There's no kind of weirdness involved with that at all.
Yeah, so Jan's out of the picture then, and then you go move into 2020, and you guys bring in who is the current drummer now, Brennan Shacklefield.
Brennan Shacklefield.
And he's so with him, you actually got to know him, which is shows you, there's always the benefits and non-benefits of technology, but this is actually pretty cool. You actually got familiar with him because I think he did a couple covers. I think he did like Spinning in Agony and Flow of Maggots on YouTube.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, he had some YouTube videos up, and I thought, wow, this is pretty cool, And so he popped up on the radar when we knew that things weren't going to work out with Jan, being he had his things going on. I don't want to make it sound like things weren't working out, but he had his things he was going to be focusing on. He was on the radar. He was on an extremely short list, and then we met him, or I met him rather, out in Vegas at one of the Death Fest there, and got to know him a little bit better. And here he is. He is a really, really good fit. He brings elements of John and Chad to the band. So he's really, really perfect.
I did hear some interview he did, and he was saying that when he found out that he was basically going to start jamming with you guys, he started practicing like 280 BPMs until his hands, basically his tendons were hurting and his hands were like completely raw.
Oh my God. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's cool and not cool. Right? like you're in, man. Don't hurt yourself. You know.
And you first met him at the Maryland Festival, personally.
I think I first met him at one of the Vegas Death Fests. They had a drum set up outside, which was kind of cool, and for anybody just to go play. And there's obviously good and bad coming out of that, right?
Yeah.
But he ended up going back there and was playing a couple Brodequin songs, which was pretty cool. And then we just started talking, and at that point, it was like, yeah, okay, he's on the short list. You know what I mean? So there really wasn't a whole lot of decisions to be made when
I think he was influenced by Chad a lot, wasn't he?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's for sure. And when he's playing with us, you can tell on certain things that's definitely was an influence.
And you guys do a EP when you guys worked with. Was that the first time you guys worked with Josh Welshman of Defeated Sanity?
Yeah, that was the first time we worked with him. Yeah, that's right. And we were pleased. We thought, hey, he did a great job, and that's what led us to reaching out again when it came time for the album.
When you guys kind of did that, what was it, to kind of just to say we're still around right now? We're still.
Yeah, we did the same thing, right, with John back in the day. We did the Prelude to Execution little EP, and back then we thought this would be kind of a cool way to introduce John to people that maybe never heard of him before, And we thought the same thing with Brennan and this one. Well, we did it once before. Let's do it again. That'll be kind of fun, And so that's why we did that. Kind of like here's kind of some of the new stuff. Here's kind of where we're going with this.
You gave Brennan, you gave him. So Mike wrote the drums, but also when you guys gave it to him, you guys pretty much said, "Hey, man, if you want to change up something, you guys gonna give him a little bit of space to mess with him."
Yeah, it's the same way with the album. Mike plays drums, but he programs a lot of drums when we're writing stuff. Because, when you got the riffs going, that's cool. But now being able to take advantage of technology, well, let's go ahead and put some drums in there so we can really kind of get a better idea what it sounds like. So Mike, when we write something, he'll go ahead and put in drums. And that's what he did with the album, too. He said, here's what I'm thinking, But by all means, if you hear something different or want to change something, please do.
And so that you guys did that, and what was his first show with you guys, Brennan's? His first live gig?
First live gig with Brennan. That's a good question. I should remember these shows more, but I just can never. They all start to blur together.
We're all getting a little older up there.
Right, we're all getting old, right? So it's like I'm not sure what the first show with Brennan was. I have no idea. I'd have to really think about that. It might have been. No, I don't want to say something to be wrong. I'm just gonna say I don't remember.
Well, and Brendan, he lives in Texas, right? So what does he? You guys he comes and stays with you when you guys do the jam sessions?
Yeah, he comes out here. He's coming in a couple weeks, as a matter of fact, and we'll go ahead and just kind of get ready for the Maryland Death Fest, and that'll be primarily what we do. I'm not sure if we'll spend a whole lot of time with new stuff with the show just around the corner. So we'll probably just work on the set list.
Ooh, and did you guys with the pandemic? Did you guys lose many gigs or?
Yeah, that was an interesting time, So everybody knows it was an interesting time, right? It was, we were completely shut down, right? And then you weren't really even willing to take a chance on going somewhere because you didn't want to get stranded somewhere. You know what I mean? So it was just kind of like, well, I guess we're on hiatus here for a bit and see what happens. But in some ways, it gave us a chance to take that time to work on new stuff because there wasn't the pressure of, we got to have something now and go play now because there was nowhere to play, so you could just go ahead and say, we'll just work on new stuff.
Yeah. And you guys speaking of that, which we're going to talk about the new album now. And you speak of new stuff. I mean, you speak of that pandemic, you guys actually have almost, I guess, the next record after the one we're about to speak of, you already have most of that written.
Yeah. For sure.
So let's talk about the latest record now, which is the Harbinger of Woe. Came out on Seasons of Mist. How'd you get involved with them?
We met those guys and Hellfest. We played Hellfest, and we were backstage. They had that was an insane.
Is that the best
festival?
is that the best festival you've played?
Oh God, yeah. I mean, it's a once in a lifetime type thing, right? I mean, you're backstage and like Henry Rollins is sitting next to you, and crap like that you never think. Nikki Sixx is sitting at the bar 6 feet down from you, and you never think you're going to find yourself in this situation. Like everything is super top notch, as you would expect at a fest of that size. And nothing against any of the smaller fests. They all do a fantastic job too. This is just a situation where it's next level, And we met Michael, the owner of Season of Mist, back there. And what was interesting was him and David and other members of the staff from Season, they knew who we were, which we thought was really strange. Like Attila from Mayhem was back there and he knew who we were. And we're like, what? Like, how do you, this is weird, but Season guys knew all about the previous releases. They're asking us about future stuff. And we're like, yeah, we've got plans. This is what we're thinking about doing, so on and so forth. And it was crazy how much they knew about us and how interested they were in the new material. So they were just saying, hey, keep us plugged in. Let us know what's going on. We want to know when you guys have new stuff. Nothing was said, of course, about like, hey, we want to release your stuff right there. So, we came home and exchanged emails a few times about what was going on. And then, of course, you had the whole COVID thing. And then when I sent them the 2 tracks off the EP early, just as a, hey, here's what we got. Let me know what you guys think. And they were like, we want to do the next record. And we were like, oh, okay, well, that's cool. That was pretty easy. We didn't really even have to pitch anything. But we were already, we know a ton of the bands that are on their label for sure, and they do great work with what they do. And other labels had talked to us, and it was like, well, when you have the album done, send it to us, and we'll check it out. These guys didn't wait for that, and that was a big deal to us. That off of 2 songs, they were confident that the rest of the record would be good, and so we're like, yeah, this is where we're going. Let's do this, and it was unanimous.
That's
no debating required.
And that came out on March 22nd. That this record that we're speaking of now.
Yep.
And the lyric wise, now going back to some of the stuff we were talking about earlier, did you feel like on this record your lyrics changed from just the experiences you had in the last, say, I guess it would be like 15 years, right? Just because I'd actually heard you had said that you felt like you used a little more empathy on this record.
That's 100% accurate. Early on albums were very much kind of black and white in describing what was before you. You have a given execution taking place, and this is what they do when they get the condemned person there, and this is how they do it. On this one, we still do that. We still talk about what's happening or the instrument or whatever, but I kind of try to dig in a little more to what may be kind of being perceived by the condemned and the executioner or the inquisitor. I mean, obviously we don't know. We weren't there. We don't know exactly what they're thinking. We're taking liberties here. But yeah, there was a certain element of empathy for sure on this one that I kind of wanted to try and tap into.
Did you realize that when you started writing it though, or was that something you kind of...
No, not at all. No, it was not something that was a conscious decision. It was just something as I was writing it, it just came along of like, man, okay, well, here's what's happening, but what kind of is the experience here? What's kind of the experience of the family member witnessing this happen, etc. And that really started to play a larger role in the writing than I had anticipated. Even though I thought, I think on this track I might kind of want to get a point of view from the executioner. And then when I started touching on that, it just opened a whole new section. Yeah, and so there was a conscious decision on one hand, but I guess from an empathy standpoint, that was not something I thought would come out. So it was an interesting evolution.
We're going to play.
You think maturity helps too, being older?
Yes, absolutely.
Because I don't want to write the lyrics that I used to write. I mean, I don't mind writing the sub. Because I'm Tony will tell you, I'm kind of like end of the world, Armageddon.
Mm-hmm.
That's the kind of shit that interests me, and because it can happen. We can be talking right now, and a fucking something drops out of the sky. But the way I wrote 20 years ago and the way I'd write it now are probably
Yeah.
way different.
Right.
Because of
Right.
getting the point across. Because before you would just say words that were probably brutal as shit. Now it's
Right.
almost, you flip it with more classy. I don't know how else to describe
Right.
it, but
Yeah, no, I think you're right. Yeah, there's definitely a difference. I approach it differently. I definitely approach it differently. I know I approach it differently. And you're right. Like some of the verbiage and things are different. The way I actually construct it. But I was not expecting. I mean, I guess it's kind of naive, but I was not expecting that to happen when I started writing. You know, I didn't think of it,
Right.
but as it was coming out and I was reading the lyrics back, I was like, this is same but different.
probably better
You know?
because you realize you're tapping into something completely new and
Yeah,
great.
I think so. I think it is. When I read these, I think these are much better than anything I've written in the past. Yeah.
And you know, it's funny because what you write about, you know, we talk about like from all the, like I said, we listen to bands, all of us guys to listen to bands that have different variety. You know, you have the gore lyrics, the violent, whatever it is, you know. But what you're speaking, that time period, those medieval time periods, there was some of the most fucked up stuff going on. Like, you know, that's why when people say, and you know, people say, oh, the world's so awful. Well, yeah, the world is totally fucked up.
Mm.
But if you go back through history, you know, it's always been kind of barbaric and crazy. You know, now everything is on your cell phone and you can see someone get massacred like 20 minutes after it happens.
Right. Yeah, it's insane, right? Like, I mean, it's just the way it is. But, you know, I was having a conversation earlier, excuse me, you know, if we brought back the gladiatorial games, for example, excuse me, how fast would that
Look
sell
at
out?
extreme fighting. I mean, come on, that's, you know, it's,
The
Right,
Coliseum
right.
would be 10 times the size of what it is.
Right. And it'd be live streamed and you'd have all that stuff. It'd be an enormous success. You know,
Lions,
there's
battling
no doubt
lions.
about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. It's just there's something in a lot of humanity that craves these things.
Social media
you
ruined
know?
everything.
well, it's like last night I'm sitting here
And
in
social
Lithuania,
media.
you know, I'm over in Eastern Europe. I'm watching live on my computer, like Iran shooting missiles over to, you know,
Drones.
Israel.
They were firing.
Yeah,
They
drones.
were firing thousands of drones into Israel. I mean,
and I'm just watching
and
this. I mean,
and the Iron Dome. We're watching the Iron Dome literally take them out, and it's like, this is fucking not a movie. This is like real.
well, you might remember the Gulf War when we first. That was the first time I ever
Yep.
saw like war shit on TV actually going on. Not real. I don't think it was real time, but it was kind of like you saw the fighting going on.
You saw the tracer bullets going
Yeah.
up into the sky and stuff, and you were like, "Holy shit! This isn't a movie. This is real deal."
Now it's like, oh, there's a war going on. Let me turn on my laptop and I could watch it live. I mean, it's pretty insane.
Mm-hmm. It is insane, no doubt about it.
You know,
Different times, man. We're in way different times.
yes, definitely. And I'm actually going to play a track on now off of the new record, Harbinger of Woe. I'm going to play this song, "Fall of the Leaf." Anything you could tell us about this track, Jamie?
So fall of the leaf is slang. Part of the whole execution world is they very much like other professions, right? They have their own slang, you know. And so fall of the leaf is slang for hanging. That's just one of those terms they use, and I thought it was kind of an interesting spin on that. So, you know, we're talking about a situation we lead up to the person being taken to the point of execution, and yeah, fall of the leaf is just a interesting way of saying hanging.
Yeah, so we're gonna play it. We're gonna play "Fall of the Leaf" now off Harbinger of Woe, the new album from Bodequin, and it was released on March 22nd. Whoever hasn't heard it yet, on Season of Mist. We're gonna play that, and we'll be right back with Jamie on the Tampa Morgue after this track. That was Harbinger of Woe. I was actually off the record. That was Fall of the Leaf from Brodequin. And Jamie, you actually, so when you first started, you've actually simplified your rig a little bit, right, from what you're playing from back in the day?
Yeah, I try to go as bare bones as possible. It's enough carrying this crap. I don't want to have to carry more than I need to. I try to get everything to fit in my base case, although now it's probably not. I end up getting a pedal board because I'm going to run some samples off the pedal board, so that's going to kind of take a little more space than I wanted, but it is what it is. Basically, the bass runs through the Sans amp and straight to the board when we play live. I'm not bringing out the giant Ampeg refrigerator or anything anymore. None of that stuff. I mean, my God, it's not. You don't need to do that anymore. The technology has gotten us to a spot to where you don't have to do that. Back, for example, when we played Hellfest, going back to that, the amp I took to Hellfest and the amp Mike took to Hellfest was our iPads. That's exactly what we used. We just used amp simulators for Hellfest. Sounded great, but it was one of those things where we were a little bit, in retrospect, looking at it like, man, what if something crashed?
Technology.
Right. So then we said, you know what? That's cool, but maybe it's not that cool.
Yeah, the actual Vegas Fest that you played, it was actually 2018. I was in a band called Hideous with Matt Bishop, Human Artifacts.
Yes,
yeah. So we played, and Terry Butler was our bass player from Obituary, but he was touring. Yep. So we played without a bass player. So just imagine the shittiness it was. We played the Saturday or whatever day was the opening night. So I know they did a night before with Diabolic. We played the next day. And we had these little more pedals. They're fly rigs, I call them. It's a little, literally a little pedal board with every effect and guitar amp in it you could possibly. It's made by a company called Moore. I hooked Matt. I told Matt, dude, get one of these. We flew in with little tiny power amps that hook to the, so you have your own fly rig. You don't have to depend. You just need a cabinet. And I remember when we hooked them up, the guy goes, "What are you doing?" Because he's like, "What amp do you want to use?" And I'm like, "I got this." And they laughed at us. They literally laughed at us. And I'm like, okay. And then when we started playing, he was like, "Holy fuck, dude." And he's like, "That fits in your backpack." I'm like, "Yeah."
Right.
And I can go everywhere and have my sound every night. Because I used a Kemper for a while. Because I play guitar in that band. I'm actually a bass player. I'm like you.
I got you.
And I use Dark Glass. So Dark Glass is my thing. Since before anybody had them, I played hundreds and hundreds of pedals. I like Troy Sanders' bass tone. So I'm like, if I can put that in metal, it would be killer.
Right.
Of course. What he says he has and what he actually has, he's not telling you. Because everything I buy, I said, it don't sound like you. But buying boogie rigs and all this shit. So but the fly rigs, man, and I tried the iPad too through a little iPhone, the iRig into the
iRig.
And I thought the same thing because it sounded killer because I had a Positive Grid was and I'm like, if this iPad dies, say I think it's plugged in, or somebody turns the power off and you're in the middle of playing, it makes sense because when we toured Massacre did a tour with DTA, and Tony, what's the band that opened for us? You always say
Rivers of Nile.
Rivers of Nile. I'm watching these guys with little Kemper, little rolling cases. They have like 3 of them. The bass player just had a pedal board, and they all went front of house. And I'm going, wow. And then I toured with a band last year in Europe. They flew with rigs and only used in-ears. And I'm thinking, okay, wait a minute. If your in-ear goes out and you have no monitors on stage, what do you do? So there's a degree to technology is killer. Yep. And then there's a degree that if it fails, I always think monitors, you have to have stage monitors. Remember when we saw Creator, Tony?
Yeah,
we were so fucking disappointed, dude. We played with them. We're backstage, like side, had a perfect view where nobody could be. And they come out and they're playing Kempers. So no volume on stage for guitars or bass. It's just drums and vocals. And I'm like, this is Creator. You know what I mean? And I'm like, this is terrible, man. I was so mad because I don't want to call it cheating, but you're cheating. You know, I mean, there's no sound. You're relying on technology. So yeah,
Laptops,
I get it.
there's bands that have canceled tours because their laptops are fucked up and stuff like that.
Right.
I mean, because they run now. And that's another thing, Jamie. You guys, so with you guys don't use intros. You guys are not to your like on the albums. You guys don't.
The
You
albums,
guys, which is
yeah.
you kind of would
No.
expect in a weird way if you look at like the material. You
Yeah.
say, okay, I could picture an intro, but you guys don't do that in the beginning of the
Right.
albums.
No, we've always just thought we'll just get straight to the point. I've got nothing against intros. Tons of bands that I love have intros, and we do use intros every now and then when we play live. But yeah, on disc, we just thought, we'll just go ahead and get right to it. That's kind of something we just kept doing.
yeah, I can tell you that the intro thing can get very frustrating because Monstrosity uses a lot of them. And I love it because it gives you a break in between songs. So I get it when you're doing an hour and 20 set or something. But sometimes you're like so hyped. You're like, come on. I just, you want to get to the next thing. So it's like, and plus, if that fails, because Lee, the drummer is the one, then what?
Yeah.
So again,
yes, we don't. So, and that's the thing that we don't rely on them. And that's a good point of why. But we'll have a couple in a set and, we may use them all, we may not. It just depends on how things are going, Yeah,
and Jamie, I had read when you did early press for this record, you had said that basically that this record in its entirety has a distinct beginning and an end that allows certain elements to play along with it. What exactly did you mean by that?
So it kind of has, like, it starts off the way it does, but starts off fairly strong. But then as you kind of, the album, in my opinion, kind of has an ebb and flow to it. Even though, there's no filler songs on the album. It just has a certain way it rolls. And when you listen to it from beginning to end, I think it's an experience. I know it's getting kind of artsy, right, with the explanation, but it kind of has a certain experience. Whereas if you just go punch in, I'm going to go listen to track 6. And then I'm going to listen to track 4. Okay, that's cool.
But you're missing the full effect.
But you're missing the full effect. And I think the last track, Harbinger itself, really, the way the samples are spaced in there and the way it ends really tells you that is the end of the album. Boom, it's done. Just the way it all kind of comes together. But that's just, maybe that's just me. But that's the way I kind of perceive it.
Were you surprised by because I know I've heard nothing but positive stuff about this record for a bit now. Were you kind of, when you step away for that period of time, were you kind of surprised the embrace that Bradley got?
Yeah, for sure. It's one of those things, again, where not a lot of bands get second chances, so to speak, but we stepped away for so long, you don't know. And you don't know how people are going to perceive it. So we did some things on this record that, you hate to say, and I never said anything when it was going like, well, we got some stuff on here that's a little bit different, because then people get freaked out, So I didn't say anything like that, but there are some things on here that are different for us that we've done differently. But it was really much a natural progression for us. We didn't write anything just to write it that way. It just kind of happened as we were writing. The response has been overwhelmingly positive. We're, extremely happy about that, flattered, that it has been that way. And it was very surprising because again, we didn't really know what to expect.
And the artwork for this record, which is totally awesome artwork. You had found this in a collection, and which is, I'll let you tell the story because I think it's pretty amazing that you actually got permission to use this, but go ahead.
Yeah, so I've got this in one of my books, and it's a piece that I thought, for years would be a great piece to use, but the timing wasn't quite right on each one, when things were going on. So when the album was coming together, in my mind, this was the album cover. So I went ahead and made a few edits to it, nothing serious, just made it kind of a little grungy on the edges and here and there, tweaked a couple things, and I ended up going ahead and laying out the whole damn album, with this as the artwork. And we all loved it. We thought it was fantastic. And things are different, when you're not releasing it yourself.
I was going to ask you, this is before you got permission, when you had the layout already.
That's correct. But I was so committed and so much that this is the album cover, I just went with it without even thinking, well, we probably should get permission first. You know what I mean? So I took off with it, and then, I realized, things are different. We're not releasing it on Unmatched Brutality. This is going to have a far bigger reach. We're going to have to find out how we get the rights to this. So I got in touch with Will and everybody at Season of Mist and said, here's what we want to do. But currently this piece of work is being housed in a museum in Lisbon, Portugal, so we're going to have to get permission. And they were like, oh boy, they don't have anybody that's done that before. They're not sure what to do. And I'm like, well, I'm not either, because we're going to obviously have to contact the museum or whoever owns the rights. So we went down that path, and it took probably a month or so of going back and forth. And once I think once the museum realized we weren't going to bastardize this, we weren't going to do something disrespectful or completely change it or whatever. And then they also dug in and did a little background work on who we were, who are we talking about here? What have they done before? And they said, oh, yeah, go ahead. All you need to do is just say that you've got permission from the museum.
Were you shocked?
And we're like, oh, I was stunned. Yeah. Because I couldn't think of anybody that I know that has received permission from a museum to use a piece of artwork that they have.
And there was no fees. You didn't have to pay like
there was
$5,000.
No fee whatsoever. Wow. No fee whatsoever. In fact, the only requirement they had was that we credited Jose De Brito for the artwork.
That's awesome.
And I said, well, we'll go one step further. We'll credit the artist and we'll credit the museum for giving us the permission to do that. And so that's what we did. And everybody was in agreement, and it was crazy. I never thought that I'd be in a position like that. It was wild.
And it's a great cover. It's one of those, covers that you would see in a store back in, say 87, 88, 89, 91, whatever. And you would pick it up just for the cover. It's,
right.
It's a beautiful piece. I mean, it's,
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I thought it captured everything that I was going for lyrically on the album. So that was that moment where when things were coming together and I went back and dug through old pieces of artwork that I had, it was time, for this one to be used.
That's excellent. Yeah, it's definitely a great cover.
Yeah.
And I know we've kept you for a long time tonight, so we're gonna let you go here in a couple minutes.
Sure.
But now lineup wise, is it like you, Brennan, and John? Is it everything's perfect, the perfect chemistry right now going into where you guys are headed now? Because you guys, I mean, I don't know what you guys have planned so far for this year, but
yeah, it's solid. Mike, Brennan, and myself, it's as good as it can be, man. It's like I couldn't really ask for better at this point. Everything's clicking, things are good. The only thing we officially have is Maryland Death Fest coming up next month. There's been a lot of stuff coming in, but one of the tricks is, and this is no fault of them, this is just the way it is. Promoters are a little bit hesitant on some fronts because prices are unknown, and you know what I mean. Like tickets can be one price this week, and then next month it can be twice as much. I mean, there's a lot of unknowns, so we'll see what happens. But I suspect we'll have several opportunities coming our way to go play.
And you guys have started demoing any of the new stuff?
We have probably, I think there's probably 6 or 7 tracks we've got right now that are, I say done, but what I mean is the structures are there. They're not done, but the overall structure's there. We just have to, there'll probably be a couple tweaks here and there, but I would suspect, I'm trying to think. I don't know. I don't want to say, I hate saying, we're going to record this year and then it falls through and then you get, you said you were going to record, how it is. But I'll say this much. We're more than halfway through the material for the next album.
Okay.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's definitely awesome. And, I think one thing I've heard you say, which I think is great, because me and Ed always kind of bitch about this on the show, the whole AI thing now, and and who knows, like, I was just seeing something the other day too, where they said that people, I mean, eventually who is going to be the first artist that gets called out for like not really writing a song? Right. It's going to happen eventually. Who is going to be that person who gets tagged with that, And I did hear you say that you will never use the artwork and stuff like that. And we kind of feel the exact same way.
No, that's something that is, I mean, it's one of those things where you never say never, right? Because it always bites you in the ass. But with this, it will never be AI artwork for Erotica material. It's not going to happen. The does not fit what we do in any aspect. A friend of mine sent me something yesterday, and I was completely blown away by it. I do follow the AI thing. I find it interesting. We're making, tremendous strides in that world, whether it's good or bad.
But you can also see where the problem is going to occur.
Right. I see the problems. He sent me a song yesterday where all he had to do was provide the lyrics. I could not believe what
Ed was talking about this.
I did it. I did it through ChatGPT as a joke. I said, "Give me something for in related to the movie Deep Impact regarding the end of the world with a meteor."
Yeah.
And it wrote these lyrics. Right. Now, of course, it's not something I would have written because it went almost. It was almost like a script. You know what I mean? But you could turn it was turned into a song. But I read it because I actually wrote a song for Diabolic about that exact subject. So I wanted to see what it would write. And I looked at it. Remember, I think I showed it to you, Tony. I was like, this is fucking ridiculous that now I don't have to write lyrics anymore. Yeah, I wouldn't do it because to me, those words that were on that page are nothing that would come out of my mouth.
Yeah,
but
I understand.
The fact that you don't have to work, because that's the idea of you sat down and wrote those lyrics. And when you look at the inlay of your record and you're like, I wrote that shit.
Exactly.
That's a feeling I like. When I look at the lyrics I wrote, I go, man, fuck yeah. Especially all these years later.
But in 20 years, are people still going to feel like that? Because the mental, once us, as we were saying with Snowy, we had Snowy Shaw on recently. We were talking with him, like once us, dinosaurs quote start passing away, are the younger people. It's not, like I said, I think it's only maybe, I would say about maybe in the next 10 years that some artist gets busted for putting out an album that he wrote nothing of and just made up these hit songs that were just produced from AI.
Right. Yeah, it'll be the next generation's Milli Vanilli.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
But you will never have the priests and the maidens and the slayers and everything in between, or even we call ourselves dinosaurs, but we can write a new record like you did, and it still has some weight because we're still putting the same effort in we did 30, 20 years ago. But I always tell my son, he asks if I could be his age, 21 now, knowing what I know from everything I've experienced, would I do it? I'm like, fuck no. The stuff that I experienced in the like we lived through the best years of music. 80s and 90s to me were the best years of music of every genre.
Sure.
Yeah. So it's like, no, I would never want to try to emulate something with AI because there's no way it could understand what that was. I don't think so. No, maybe artwork, but I don't think you could do it with music.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, they'll get better with that for sure. But so the track this friend of mine sent me the other day, he wrote the lyrics. He provided the AI engine with the lyrics, and it wrote all the music.
It's crazy.
And it was insane. Like, I'm still kind of blown away by it, guys.
How are people not going to try to pass this off? Come on. We're talking about humanity here.
It's going to happen. It's probably happening right now.
We probably own some of these records.
Someone is going ahead and they're saying, here's the name of the band and I'm going to, whatever, it's going to write all the lyrics for me and here's the music. I was blown away. If you would have heard that on the radio, you wouldn't have known. That was the part that was so crazy.
Yeah, some people are saying the new Priest, that's AI Halford, because they're saying there's no way he can still hit those highs.
I don't think Halford would do that.
I don't think so either, because I saw they just played a concert in South America somewhere, or no, it was in UK or somewhere because what's his name, KK played, and he was hitting those highs, and I'm like,
still doing it.
No. It's studio magic. We know you can fix shit in the studio,
of course.
But if he can still do it live, then it's not AI.
We'll do an AI Ozzy Osbourne interview on here, Ed. We'll definitely, just start plugging in Keith Richards. We'll put whoever we want on here. It'd be crazy. But Jamie, first of all, where can people go who want to find anything to do with Brodequin?
So you could go to brodequinofficial.com. That's the website. We're on Facebook as Brodequin TN, as in Tennessee. And then, of course, seasonofmist.com will have all kinds of goodies there too. Any of those. Instagram as well. Brennan runs the Instagram for us, so you can find us there as well.
There you go. And whoever hasn't heard it, it's Harbinger of Woe, which is the new album from Brodequin.
It is awesome.
Yep, it came out in March on Season of Mist. Yeah, we're looking forward to the next one, man. And, Jamie, we always appreciate people give us their time, and we really appreciate you giving us your time. I know you've been in the press circles the last couple of weeks. We kind of tried to wait a little bit to get you on until after you did a bunch of them, because I know it's a lot you got to do. But we appreciate you coming on the Tampa Morgue.
Hey, look, thank you, man. The pleasure's all mine. I appreciate it. Anytime you want to chat, whether it's about this or whatever, just let me know. I'd be happy to do
so.
That's
awesome, man. And we'll say goodbye to you when we disconnect here. But again, killer record, and everybody make sure you check it out. And Ed, for people who want to hear the Tampa Morgue, where can they find us?
Oh my goodness. Apple, Spotify, I think Amazon, anywhere there's a podcast. We do YouTube. Of course,
no video, so we don't.
No video,
very popular.
Don't get upset. Sure. And Instagram to get us, and burn Facebook. And pretty much thetampamorgue@gmail.com with those crazy questions that they like to ask. And
so everybody who missed our last show on last Sunday, this past Sunday, we had Blood Serpent on from Vietnam. We have Hooded Menace. We got Harry from Hooded Menace coming on Monday. And then we got Ryan Waste from Bat and Municipal Waste on May 12th. And I'm sure there'll be someone in between that. But anybody who listens, we appreciate you as always. Feel free to drop us a line. Jamie, again, man, killer new record. Great to have you hang out with us.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
And any last words for anybody? Or
no, I don't think so. Just swing by any of those socials or whatnot. Check it out. Of course, feel free to get in touch. Anybody can get in touch at any time, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Maryland Death Fest, right? You guys are. That's the next thing.
Yeah. Wish I was playing this year.
Yep, we'll be there. Yeah, for sure, man.
Well, Jamie, appreciate it again. Everybody else, we'll talk to you guys next week on Monday when we got Harry from Hooded Menace. And until then, guys, we'll see you. Everyone, thanks for listening to the Tampa Morgue.
See ya.